Hello everyone, thank you for being here. My name is Scott Leadingham and I am joined today by Esmy Jimenez, the Yakima Valley reporter for Northwest Public Broadcasting. Thank you for being here today, Esmy.
Thank you for having me, Scott. I'm super excited to let the community know what we've been up to and the latest happenings that are taking place in Central Washington.
And there certainly are a lot of happenings, and I should say if anyone who is joining us live has any questions or comments they'd like to make, go ahead and leave those in the comments section on Facebook, and we'll try to get to those here in the next few minutes. First, Esmy, let's turn to some of the big news of the week all around the region and the nation, frankly. The walkouts that were happening at various schools, including there in Central Washington and the Yakima Valley. You talked with a bunch of students and administrators, first there at YV Tech in Yakima. Tell us what happened at YV Tech.
At YV Tech, there were some really interesting happenings in the sense that the law enforcement class, so first of all, I should explain that the school here is a technical school. There's everything from carpentry to law enforcement, nursing. So the students attend half the time here and half the time at their home school. And the law enforcement class in the morning and the afternoon actually did a demonstration using 17 students. They actually used their body, laid them on the ground in the number 17, while their fellow classmates actually took a knee, and then they had these signs on their backs that said things like, "Don't let this happen here," vote, protect your friends. And I thought that was really powerful because the students also used fake blood and covered themselves in it. So it was this really harrowing vision of these students laid out with their bodies on the ground. And additionally, the other students from the other classrooms actually came down and walked by. So it was a really visual demonstration. It was really powerful.
That's particularly striking since, like you said, those are law enforcement students, particularly going into careers in policing down the road, most likely. So that kind of dichotomy between the two of people in law enforcement classes who might in the future be school resource officers perhaps, and then they're participating in this demonstration. Any of them talk about the safety issues in schools and what they're feeling about that?
Absolutely. So I talked to 3 different students. All 3 of them said they wanted to go into law enforcement. They were hoping to be police officers here in the city of Yakima. And they did mention, yeah, I might have a gun in the future, but I think it's really important that I'm educated how to use it and that students don't bring guns to school. One of the students actually, it also struck me that they mentioned they actually were hoping to have more administrators in this school armed. He said that he didn't feel safe enough and that he was worried that anyone could come in at any point. And I thought that was really interesting because he actually commented on Toppenish School District, which is down the road, and there are 19 armed administrators currently in that school district. And I was also at the middle school there for their action, and they took 17 minutes of silence for the 17 victims in Parkland. And I thought it was really interesting because there's these middle schoolers, they're 12, they're 13, and they're out being silent for these 17 minutes in a really quiet, somber moment. And they did a really good job.
That is really fascinating. Most people probably didn't realize that there is a school in Washington State and other districts around the country where there are armed administrators, at least, not necessarily teachers. But how long has that policy been in place there in Toppenish? I'm sure most people didn't even realize that.
That policy has actually been there since 2014, so it's now 4 years that there had been armed administrators. They do go through intensive training, and I should clarify that there are no teachers that are armed. It's only administrators. So the superintendent, John Cerna, actually himself carries a weapon. And
are you aware if any of the students know about that, or how did you talk to any students who were like, "Oh, I had no idea about that"?
Mm-hmm. No, most of the students are aware. There's also been parents that have chimed in the conversation, and they say they support the school district. They feel like they're safer for it. Some of the teachers or not the teachers, but some of the administrators who do carry have remained anonymous to keep their names safe. But they said they also have assimilated it into carrying a gun and feel like it does help keep students safer.
So speaking of student safety, let's go up the Kittitas Valley, up the interstate there to Ellensburg area. You were at a meeting there on Tuesday night before all the walkout demonstrations on Wednesday involving students and schools in the Kittitas Valley. Talk about some of the stuff that was discussed there in Ellensburg by various students.
So the Ellensburg School District actually did something a little bit different. The day before the walkouts, they led a panel with 7 students from all the schools actually in the Ellensburg School District, and it was middle school and high school students, and it was a panel led by them where they had a facilitator actually ask them questions like, how do you feel like technology has affected bullying in your school? do you have access to guns? How easy is it to access drugs? What else do you think we could be doing to provide students with mental health resources? And so these students are coming forward saying, yeah, it's really easy to get guns in my school, or yes, it is really easy to access drugs in my school. Some of the students actually said that they were worried because some adults didn't really take notice when something was wrong. And so when they did bring complaints forward of bullying, whether that was on the internet or in person, they felt like their concerns weren't taken seriously. So it was very indicative for the community to have this listening session, really centering their own students from that entire district to tell them, here's what's really going on day in, day out.
So let's move on to another topic that is of interest, not just in Central Washington, but all over the state and the Northwest, and that is marijuana, because it is obviously a very hot topic in the state of Oregon and Idaho, or excuse me, Washington and Oregon, where it is illegal recreationally. And then, of course, we have this national conversation going on about how the Department of Justice federally and Attorney General Jeff Sessions is going to respond to marijuana businesses in the United States. So in Yakima County, and I believe Benton County, correct, there's some discussion about how that will be regulated or not allowed with retail marijuana businesses or grow operations. What are some of the things that you've been covering or hearing about how the community is responding to how marijuana is treated in Central Washington?
That's a really good question. Here in the community, it's more conservative, so it's a little bit different than you would typically see maybe in Portland or Seattle. The communities here didn't support a lot of cannabis industries, and there has been moratoriums in Benton County, for example, for 6 months, and we're still 3 months away from that first moratorium ending. And that means that no new businesses, either growers, operators, sellers, can actually establish any kind of business in Benton County within what are they called? Like not unregulated. What's the word that I'm thinking of? Unincorporated areas in the county. That's what I'm thinking. And so it's been interesting because the ones that are established are saying like, we just, we're able to get in, we're established, nothing can be taken from us now permit-wise. But for new growers, new industry that wants to come in, they're really facing this challenge of becoming part of the community, of having the community actually accept their permits. So that's kind of what's happening in Benton County. In Yakima County, we saw Prop 1, which was like a non-binding vote, which was essentially asking, whether or not they also want to do something similar and allow new growers, new cannabis business to come in unincorporated areas. And farmers here have been telling me, cannabis farmers here have been saying, we're really worried, what if we get kicked out? Where will we go next? A lot of them have put in a lot of money in order to make their business operate. And depending on how Yakima or Benton County goes, they might not actually be here in the next year or so.
It's kind of fascinating, Esmy, because obviously Central Washington, the Yakima Valley, Tri-Cities area, very agriculturally based economies. And so traditionally that's been, like tree fruit economies or other things around wine and vineyards and things like that. But now marijuana is also a part of that equation in terms of it's an agricultural product. And many of the farmers who might be involved in it now, maybe previously were involved in growing, tree fruit. I'm just curious what you've heard about reaction from those farmers, the people who might have once farmed apples or cherries or anything else, and now they're kind of looking at this as another way to supplement their cropland.
Some farmers definitely see it as just another crop, but for many others, there's I guess there's a kind of cultural norm associated with growing cannabis. And in these communities, because they are more rural, they're a little bit more religious, a little bit more conservative. Oftentimes it's seen as promoting drug usage. Often it's associated with sending a poor message to the kids in the community where we're accepting that this is normalized behavior. So I've seen mostly farmers say they don't support it, and the ones that are coming in are usually outside of the community, and they're coming in with cannabis industries. And so it's seen as a little bit of push of newcomers coming in with cannabis.
Certainly a fascinating issue to keep watching in the coming election year and in the years to come. So finally, Esmy, on a little lighter note, last time we talked, we were discussing the movie Coco and how it was very impactful for communities, immigrant communities in the United States, particularly with ties to Mexico and Dia de los Muertos, and in the context of the Oscars, which were about to happen. And since then, you've written about what Coco meant to you and your family and immigrant communities, and also the Oscar was awarded to Coco. I'm just curious what you and your family and others might have felt in terms of being recognized for that story.
I think the Latino and immigrant community, especially here in Central Washington, was really moved. They were really supportive and happy that this film got the attention that it deserved. For me, writing about it, one of the things that I just could not get away from was this idea of mourning our dead. And in Mexican culture, with Dia de los Muertos, right, it's often not seen as like the sad holiday. It's very celebratory. It's happy. You're actually at cemeteries with the people that have passed, and you're laying out their favorite foods and candles. There's music. Unfortunately, though, for immigrant communities in Central Washington, a lot of our dead are physically buried across the border, whether that's in Mexico or other communities. That means we can't physically see them. We can't celebrate with them. And it just was something that kept lingering in my mind in terms of kind of a sad moment that we can't actually really be with them. And so that was something that I definitely wanted to reflect on and have others reflect on, because it's something that I know has impacted my mother, it's impacted me, and it's something that I want to be curious about for our future generations, right? How are our future kids going to actually be able to participate in Dia de los Muertos if they're dead or not physically here? So those are the questions that I think of. Maybe not as light of a tone as we wanted, but still something that I want to talk about.
Well, if anyone out there would like to read Esmy's writing about the movie Coco and how it affected her and her family, you can find that at nwpb.org, along with all of her other reporting from Central Washington. Esmy, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you have a great rest of the week and weekend.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And if anyone would like to see any of Esmy's tweets, you can find her on Twitter at Esmy Jimenez. I am at Scott Leadingham on Twitter. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to engaging with you in the future.